Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to discuss the books that I read in April. I actually did manage to read a few books in April. I didn't fully repeat my problem that I had in March, which was starting or reading parts of a lot of books and then just not getting through them. I actually had less books that I read in. I read a little bit more of The Prisoner of Azkaban, but not that much more. I read some more in Don Quixote, but I honestly still have not finished it because for some reason, I just can't seem to make myself read the last, I don't know, 7 chapters or something. I'm just having a real problem. I just can't do it. And then I pretty much didn't read any other things other than what I finished. I did start a couple of things in a couple of series, but I just didn't get that far, but you'll see those. And then I did end up DNFing one book in April, and that was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I was listening to an audiobook of that one, and I just got to a point where I did not give a flying fuck anymore. I found the narrator to be just so narcissistic and pretentious. I think the pretentiousness is what got to me a little bit more than the narcissism. Like, I can handle a narcissistic character if there's like a very interesting thing to them, like there's some kind of lesson to be learned, it's a psychological study, it's whatever, I can handle it. Especially if they're not supposed to be taken seriously or something. I can handle that. Pretentiousness, however, I have a really hard time dealing with that. It is constantly agitating to me, and I found the narrator to be just insufferable. And the writing overall, and I don't know if this is just how Donna Tartt writes or if that's how she wrote this particular book. I'm not 100% sure. But it just, yeah, it was just oozing with pretentiousness, and I could not fucking be arsed. Even the thought of, ooh, there's a murder mystery element to it. No, there's no mystery element to it. It's just a bunch of spoiled rich kids who end up fucking murdering someone. There's no mystery to that at all. It's just a bunch of privilege being thrown around. So I was just like, you know what? I don't care. Yeah. I DNF'd it because I decided I did not give a fuck any longer. So yeah. If that's controversial, sorry. I actually finished reading. I had, let's see, 5 books that I actually finished reading this month. A poetry book, a nonfiction, and then 3 fantasy novels. So, let's start with the poetry, I guess. So, the first book that I finished reading was Poems by Len Penny. You may or may not have seen the poet somewhere floating around on Instagram, or does she have a TikTok? Maybe? I don't know. But yeah, she does like Scots language stuff. She'll teach like a Scots word a day kind of thing. And then she's also a poet. So she writes poetry. This is her debut poetry novel. The thing about this is, speaking of pretentiousness, I don't want to sound pretentious talking about this, that it is clearly very emotional collection. Personal, emotional, raw. Clearly. And another element of it is that everything pretty much rhymes. It's been a very long time since I have read a poetry collection where everything rhymes. So that was interesting because it's just not something that you see that often. A lot of people like mostly stick to free verse or other forms, you know, sonnet, cinquain, like just random things. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I actually really like poems that rhyme. Sometimes things did feel a little bit sing-song though. And based upon the contents of the collection, I don't know, it just felt a little bit weird at a couple of points to have it be told completely in rhyme. There were a couple of poems here and there that felt very, I don't know, teen angsty, like a little bit more like what you'd find in someone's high school notebook or something. And I'm saying this as someone who has like a couple of notebooks filled with very angsty poems from my teen years that I hope never see the light of day. And some of a couple of the poems here and there kind of felt like they were moving past like a polished piece into angsty rant territory. I'm having such a hard time like talking about this poetry book in general because like I don't want to be an asshole because it is a debut poetry collection. It's also obviously came from a very emotional place, and the poet has worked through and is still working through a lot of like grief and trauma and mental health stuff, and like so it's like really hard to talk about it without sounding like an asshole because I'm being a little bit critical of the writing, but I don't know. I think that overall it was a very good collection. I think that there's a lot of emotion that is within this book. I had to read it in more than one sitting because I just had to take a breather here and there. It's very, very powerful and emotional and stuff. And so a lot of the poems in here are also in Scots, which I think I preferred the ones that were in Scots because they just sounded really cool. Just some of them felt a little bit, I don't know, like they needed polishing a little bit, I guess is what I'm trying to get across. Like a few of the poems didn't feel like they were final draft poems. They felt like they were written, just put out there and then not really edited to be more succinct or edit down some of the more, again, just angsty, like, I don't know, man. It's, it is a good poem. It is a good collection. It just felt like it could have used a little bit more polishing before it was put out into the world. I guess that's what I'm trying to get across. Then again, maybe this is like a side of poetry that I'm not used to. Maybe it's different. I don't know, you guys. I'm having a hard time with this one. I did end up giving it like a 4-star rating because I thought maybe I'm being a little bit too unfairly harsh on it or something. And I'm not saying I didn't like it because I did enjoy it, but yeah, it just felt like I need a little bit more polishing. That's all. The nonfiction book that I read was just a quick little thing. And it was From Absinthe to Zest, An Alphabet for Food Lovers by Alexandre Dumas. This is such a weird book. Basically, this is a book that, so basically Dumas was a gourmand, an expert cook, basically. And he wrote this Grand Dictionnaire des Cuisines. So basically it goes through a bunch of ingredients from literally absinthe to zest. So it starts with absinthe, goes into anchovy, anise, apricot, beans, bear, boar, cake, and it will then talk about, in a few places there are items that he then writes down quick little recipes or different types. Like under cake, for example, gâteau, he then writes gâteau à la madeleine, so madeleine cake, gâteau à fromage de brie, a cake made with brie cheese, au kaki, fuck it, English wedding cake, English cake, gâteau à l'anglaise, and then it talks about like those particular recipes. And some of these, I feel like some ingredients, the descriptions of them are kind of tongue-in-cheek, like cock, which is literally like a rooster. That entire like section, I kind of feel like he's describing it, but at the same time he is also, I think, doing a little bit of tongue-in-cheek kind of humor about it as an ingredient. And he does that in a couple of different places, and what I found really amusing was that some of these ingredients, he is listing them, but then saying don't use them. Like about the rooster, essentially. He just goes off and talks about that, and then he says, to conclude, the cock is a very handsome animal, gallant, intrepid, and endowed with a sonorous voice, and highly representative of the French spirit, but it is worth very little in the kitchen where its offspring are preferred. So he basically went through a whole description of the ingredient, and then talking a little bit about maybe what you could make from it, and then concluding, don't use it. And he does that a couple of times in here with other items where he describes it a little bit and then says, yeah, but don't use it because it's useless, or it doesn't taste good, or here, this thing tastes a lot better. And it's like, well, why did you include it anyway? But I guess he was making a dictionary of cuisine, so like different things that would be, I guess, a little more common in a household, or maybe in an upscale household, clearly, with a lot of these things. There is also, by the way, kangaroo listed in here. There's a section on Leporide, the Belgian rabbit, which he concludes is a thing that never existed. There's like a whole story in here about the Belgian rabbit. And then I like these little inputs near the end that is, I guess, penguin, I suppose, kind of noting later that this was untrue, or this thing didn't actually exist, or etc. Just putting some thoughts onto paper about everything. And it's just such a weird, honestly, such a weird freaking book. He has this one section here about lobster, and he tells a whole freaking story about this time that he went with some friends on a fishing expedition, and how he like made this whole menu out of whatever was in the kitchen, what they had caught that day. And it's like a whole big story about that. It's really weird. The one thing though that got me just absolutely cracking up was a section on truffles. So I don't know if any of you have ever eaten truffles. I don't mean like chocolate, like Lindt truffles or anything like that. I mean like the actual truffle, like I think it's a mushroom. I think a rich person food for the most part, because I mean, you're not gonna see something like truffles being included on the menu at like 99 or Chili's or something like that. It's like a fancy thing. So I feel like it's like a rich person food or a fancy restaurant food. I will say that I have had it once, ever. It was for my grandparents' 50th anniversary. My whole family, we all got together, and like my mom and aunt and uncles, like everybody like chipped in to treat my grandparents for their anniversary to like a fancy dinner. Anyway, everybody chipped in to give like this big thing for their anniversary. And whatever place it was that we went to, we had to dress up wicked nice for it. And whatever dish I had, it was something with chicken. Part of it had like a sauce, and then there were like sliced bits of truffle or something on it. And I mean, it tasted good. And to be completely honest, I still think about that dish every so often. It will pop into my head and make me slightly sad, because I feel like that's not something that I will be eating frequently in my life, and maybe that's what makes the idea of ever tasting a truffle again particularly alluring, because it's like, I got to eat it this one time, and I don't know if I can afford to eat it again or regularly. Yeah. Anyway, the way that he described truffles is so over the top hilarious, but I mean, having tasted it once and still thinking about it, even to this day, like, I don't know, probably 15 years later, I'm still like, I can understand the obsession. So the section on truffle, or truffé. Here we have come to the gastronomy's holy of holies, the sacrum sacrorum, to the word which gourmands throughout the ages have never pronounced without lifting their hands to their hats, to the tuber cibarium, to the lycoperdon gulosorum, to the truffle. You have questioned scholars, asking them exactly what this tubercle is, and after 2,000 years of discussion, the scholars reply, as they did on the first day, "We don't know." You have interrogated the truffle itself, and the truffle has replied to you, "Eat me, and adore God." To recount the history of the truffle would be to take on the task of relaying the history of world civilization. Silent though they are, they have played a greater role in this than the laws of Minos, than the tables of Solon. And they have done so during all the great periods of the nations, and throughout the shining hours of the mighty empires. They abounded in Rome, Greece, and Libya. The barbars, coming on them, trampled them underfoot and caused them to disappear. From the time of Augustulus until Louis XV, they effaced themselves. They reappeared only in the 18th century, and they reached their zenith under the parliamentary government between 1820 and 1848. It's like, what is it, a fucking political party? It's a goddamn mushroom. The Dictionnaire de la Conversation states that in France there are several types of truffles: black, gray, violet, and garlic-scented. They are gathered in many of our departments. The limestone chain which runs through the departments of Aube, Haute-Marne, and the Côte d'Or provides the gray truffle, which is almost as delicate as the white garlic-scented truffle from Piedmont. The black truffle abounds in Perigord, Angoumois, and Quercy. It is also to be found in Gard, Dromé, Isère, Vaucluse, Hérault, Tarn, the Eastern Pyrenees, and in the Jura Mountains, Ardèche, and Lozère. Several forests in Touraine produce truffles of good quality. Brillat-Savarin says that the truffle is the diamond of the kitchen. It awakens erotic and gourmand memories in the skirted sex, and gourmand and erotic souvenirs in the bearded sex. The truffle is certainly not a positive aphrodisiac, but in certain circumstances it can make women more tender and men more amiable. He goes on. He goes on. It's like he's done like a fucking dissertation on truffles here. He says, rather than being indigestible, it has been said repeatedly, the truffle promotes the functions of the stomach, providing that it is used with restraint, and owes its digestive properties to its mildly stimulating molecules. It is nourishing, restoring, warming to cold temperatures. Meats, vegetables, fish, and other foodstuffs, whatever they may be, become lighter if they are flavored with truffles. He goes on to say, a witty middle-aged man said, when I eat truffles, I become livelier, gayer, and more alert. I feel internally, especially in my veins, a sweet and voluptuous warmth, which is not slow to communicate itself to my brain. My ideas are clearer and simpler. If it suits me, I compose verses on the spot for rich poets. I compose speeches for worried savants or for lazy deputies, and then I fall asleep. My digestion works easily, my sleep is untroubled. What is said about certain virtues of the truffle is ancient history to me. Besides, who does not know the truffle and its incomparable aroma? And it continues from there, including talking about someone preparing, like, truffles. He has a couple of truffle recipes, and yeah, if that sounded interesting to you, that's basically this very strange book where Dumas just goes on and on about stuff. Also, that middle-aged man that he talked to, I don't believe anyone in their lives has ever actually said those words out loud. I feel like maybe Dumas was doing that sin of the 1800s, which was to bullshit out your ass and pretend that actual human beings said these things out of their actual human mouths, when in reality you're just like making shit up on the spot because it's more entertaining that way. So weird, and that's pretty much this book, is just very weird. And Dumas often in here feels like he's a little bit too much. Like, maybe he's a little bit pretentious. But see, the thing about this is that I feel like he's doing this kind of, on the one hand, he's being ridiculous. But on the other hand, I think he knows that he is ridiculous. And a lot of this is also done, I think, with some amount of humor. So, yeah, it's a very, very strange book. A couple of the ingredients, like I said, mostly the meat ingredients, like the bear, the kangaroo. Don't eat kangaroos. Please don't eat kangaroos. I mean, I guess, unless you do that in Australia. Aren't they endangered though? I don't know. Anyway, some of them are a little bit challenging. But it's still really entertaining to read about anyway. So, yeah, I found this to be really funny and honestly one of the weirdest books that I own. So, I gave this like 4 stars. The next, and then we move into the fantasy books that I read, continuing my reread of the Chronicles of Verdane. I read The Black Cauldron by Lloyd Alexander. I really enjoyed revisiting this. We are continuing the story of young assistant pig keeper Taran of Caer Dallburn, who sometimes does things before he thinks, says things before he really thinks, but he has had some significant character growth since the first book, so he's a little bit wiser than he was at the beginning of the Book of Three. I think he's also a little bit older. I think at least a year has gone by. And so it's Taran, and then also the brave and utterly ridiculous Princess Eilonwy, Flute of Flam, the Bard, who is the best character, Gurgi, the weird, whatever the fuck he is, and of course, all of the interesting characters, Kull, the old warrior turned blacksmith, Dalbin, the wizard, and Lord Gwydion, and then you also have some new characters that have been introduced, because Eilonwy has been staying at Caer Dallben, and they're all kind of out and about doing their thing, and learn that there is a council being held to defeat Auron, who is the Lord of Death, basically. So Anuvin, so like the underworld. And he has these plans to continue making his undying army, like his Cauldronborn, basically. And the council is held to defeat him once and for all. They know that they have to fight him, but the best way of fighting him is to dispatch a section of them to sneak in and steal the cauldron itself, the Black Cauldron, and take it and like remove it somewhere and destroy it once and for all, because the thing's evil and they don't want him to have it because it keeps making his undying army of zombies, basically. And they also want to make sure that nobody gets their hands on it again, because they can use the power just for evil. So Taran and his companions basically get drawn into this quest. And there's also several new characters. There's a really annoying character. If you've watched the movie, the animated Black Cauldron, it basically combined some of the events of Book of Three and the Black Cauldron to make that movie, but it's very different. Like, the plot isn't fully explained in the movie, and also a lot of the events and characters are very different. Well, the characters that are in there are basically the same personality-wise and everything, but yeah, there's missing characters, and so some characters end up playing roles that other characters would take, that kind of thing. It's a decent movie, but it's a weird adaptation, basically. I just really liked this book. There was a couple of characters I remembered being particularly annoying, and I hated them even more in this one, but I did really enjoy a revisit of this. This is I think the only one out of the series that won like an award. It got the Newbery Honor Award, because it's a Lloyd Alexander, and it's talking about like a lot about honor. There's a lot of that in here, like doing something honorable, doing something for the good of everyone, kind of thing, rather than for your own personal like reasons. There's grappling again with war and violence and everything that is a big thing in a lot of his like fantasy books, and kind of dealing with the questions of, is just violence worth it ultimately? Isn't it wiser to use your brain more and talk things out more than it is to just go rushing in? That kind of thing. A lot of lines that I obviously folded down because I need to write these quotes down because they're just so good. This is just really good. There's a lot of really good characters in here. Really good character growth. There's some fight scenes. There's a little bit of humor. And overall, yeah, I just really had a good time rereading this. There is some Deus Ex Machina. So, yeah, but that's what you're going to get in here. I rated it the first time at 4 stars and I left it at 4 stars. I thought I would be able to get through book 3, but I didn't. So I'm still reading The Castle of Lear. I'm partway through. And then I read the first 2 Lord of the Rings books. So first up was The Fellowship with the Ring. If you don't know what Lord of the Rings is about, wow, I don't know where you've been. How am I gonna explain this one? Big bad rings created, lots of rings created. There's this one big bad terrible one ring, the One Ring. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. I mean, you probably know that already. Basically, evil bad guy is looking for the one ring that he lost long, long ago. He wants it back so he can, you know, have the ultimate power. Just picture, like, Jafar when he turns into a genie. Like, yeah, that kind of thing. No? Scarier than that. And basically he wants that so he can have even more power, and the ring resurfaced in The Hobbit, but no one really knew it until Gandalf figures it out. Like 50 some odd years later. Oh shit! That ring that Bilbo found, that's the One Ring. Oh fuck. We have to get rid of it. So Bilbo is a little bit too close to the ring and he ends up having to like leave. So he kind of takes off and wills the ring and everything to his young relative, I think he's a cousin technically, Frodo Baggins, and says, okay, here you've got everything. And eventually danger comes and Frodo also has to take off. A fellowship of several different characters has to be formed to take the ring and its bearer off to Mount Doom to be thrown into the fires there. Mount Doom is where it was made, and that's the only thing that can undo it, basically. And that's, yeah, they need to take it there and destroy it before the big baddie gets his hands on it, or anyone else gets their hands on it, because the ring at this point has been so corrupted with evil that basically it just, even a really good person couldn't use it because it just will eventually corrupt them as well. Yeah, that's basically this. I don't think I've given anything away because I think that's fairly standard to what everyone knows if you've just existed within the world or you've seen any of the movie adaptations. Basically, I'm continuing to be completely bewildered by the amount of enjoyment that I am getting from this series. Because as I have told you before, and it's probably come up in like book tags, it's probably come up in just talking about fantasy novels, whatever. I know I've said it multiple times in my own personal life. I DNF'd this book and The Hobbit. I've DNF'd those books multiple times, at least 5 or 6 times since I got these books as like a, I don't know, 10-year-old or something like that. I have DNF'd them so many times. I just cannot be arsed. But for some reason, since like this past winter, I've been just fucking living for this shit. And I don't know, maybe it's just the right time kind of situation, or maybe because I have been reading so much within fantasy over the past couple of years that now I'm just fully primed for it, maybe. But I'm just really enjoying it. I do have to admit though that there are sections of a lot of description where I will 100% skim. My eyes just automatically start skimming because it's like, Tolkien, come on, I really don't give a flying fuck about that. as far as everything else goes, it's really interesting. He does have some, besides some of the descriptions that honestly could, you know, be cut down a little bit, a lot of the setting described is pretty beautiful. The characters are really interesting. I love the characters a lot. It's just very interesting. It's very lush. The characters are so fun. I enjoy how flawed they all are. I really like that. I feel like everybody's got something a little bit going on. There's no real Mary Sue's in here, and I'm really glad about that. There's a lot of the descriptions, like I said. Something else that kind of bothered me was like the name things, and that's also something that I found in the Two Towers. The problem with these two books so far, and also the problem with Return of the King, because I'm a little bit into that book right now. The trouble with those is the names for things. So it's not just that we keep hearing continuously, oh, such and such a place is by such and such a place, and you have to cross mountains of blah 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 to get to the trees of blah 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 to get to this wood and that thing and then this town, and then this is the town that was destroyed in the age of blah 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 with the thing. And it's just so much info dumping. It's just so much at once, and that can be a bit much. And also the multiple names for things. We don't just get the name of the place, we also get the name in Common and in Elvish and sometimes Dwarfish, and then and then also maybe the nickname, or it used to be called this, but now it's been corrupted by, you know, evil and Sauron and shit, so now it's also called this now. And just all of this stuff, or everybody having different names. Somebody's known by this, like Aragorn is known by like at least 4 different names, and then you have Gandalf, which has 6 different names, and everybody knows him by something different, but yet they also know his other names, but some people don't know his other names, and it's so much, and it's so much to keep track of, and I feel like I need a goddamn flowchart just to like map everything. I will say Return of the King, which is maybe a little bit worrisome for me, but maybe it's just how these books ultimately got spaced out. Fellowship is the thickest. Two Towers is thinner, right? And then you get to Return of the King. Now, Return of the King has about the same amount of thickness, but actually looking at it versus the appendices and the ending, the book itself is only like this thick, and then the rest of the book is the appendices. And by appendices, I mean, I've glanced through them already. It's maps. There's like so many goddamn maps in here. There's like 6 different maps in the back of this book. Besides maps, there's also family trees of a bunch of different characters. There's also a bunch of background information, which I'm assuming is taken from the Silmarillion, maybe? That's the one that has all the basically the history of Middle-earth, right? Full disclosure, I will not be reading that one. No. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this series a lot. I don't think I will be reading the Silmarillion because it sounds a lot drier than every other thing, and I don't really care about how Middle-earth was created. I'm mostly interested in the here and now and the action. Yeah, that's what the appendix has. That it also has a bunch of other stuff. I have not seen like a guide to different words though, but I did see a breakdown on how Tolkien invented his language and also how you pronounce things. He has like, I know he was like he was interested in linguistics and stuff like that. It's like a complete breakdown of how you pronounce Elvish things, which is interesting, but I mean, I'd also kind of like there to be some kind of glossary of what the fucking word means rather than that. Like, I actually had to type in and look up to somebody else who translated certain things in here that are said in Elvish that I didn't know what it was. So the problem with this book is there isn't a lot of ladies in here. Not that there has to be ladies in every fantasy novel. I don't need to see myself in every book that I've read. In fact, a character doesn't even really need to share the same gender with me for me to see myself in a book. Like, for example, I am 100% a Ron Weasley. Like, I know this about myself. I've known this about myself. Yeah, so I don't need there to be women technically in here, but it just feels like a big sausage fest. And I kind of wish there was just a little bit more ladies in here other than just passing mentions of them. I mean, Galadriel is in here. She's very interesting. And you see Arwen a little bit. I liked Two Towers a little bit more because we see Eowyn, but Eowyn isn't in this much. I've actually seen more of Eowyn in Return of the King, and it's been fantastic. I enjoy her. I'm hoping to see more of Arwen in Return of the King, but we haven't gotten to like any part of that yet, or whatever. But there is one extra story in the appendices at the back of Return of the King where it says, I guess it's basically a section that talks about how it's Arwen and Aragorn's story, and I was like, oh, I'm here for this. This is going to be my little enjoyable read that I do like after I finish the books. Be entertaining. I love Aragorn. He is awesome. Gandalf, I keep going back and forth on. Gandalf, I very much hold, like, he is a pretty smart dude, and he tries to fix things, but I also feel like he doesn't communicate well enough. He's got these little ideas and things, but he doesn't really communicate them with the rest of everybody else. And it's like, dude, like, you're helping them fuck things up because you haven't communicated your whole plan or your whole theories or fears or things like that, and you're not making life easier on anybody else. Like, share things a little bit. Communicate, sir. That I really love Merry and Pippin. They are kind of the comic relief, but I really enjoy them very much. They are hilarious. They're really entertaining. Legolas and Gimli have the best bromance ever. I love their friendship. It is so freaking good. They like are on the outs with each other for part of this, and they get to be really good friends by the end of this. And I loved watching their friendship kind of develop, and also like just they're such good buddies, and I love that. That makes me really happy. And yeah, so I really enjoyed Fellowship of the Ring. Fuck Boromir. That's how I feel about that. I know that might be controversial, but whatever. And then we get into the Two Towers, and it took me a little bit longer to get through this. And I think what I really enjoyed about this was like the full party going around and like different things going on here in the dynamics. And in the Two Towers, everybody's kind of split up. So in the first half of the Two Towers, it's all everybody. So you have Merry and Pippin, and they've kind of been separated from other people, but you get a little bit of them. So you're getting like some of their story, and then you're getting Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. And then that's it for that part. You're getting everybody kind of separated from each other and trying to find each other again and figure out what's like, get together and, you know, do what they need to do, continue their quest basically. And then you have Frodo and Sam have kind of split off and are doing their own thing, and that's the second half of this book. And oh, man, it took me a little bit to get into this one, just because I think I was missing that dynamic of everybody together. It was just taking a little bit for me to get into this. But, oh man, yeah, Legolas and Gimli, there is this one part in the book where they are involved in like a battle, and they're away from each other, and but they keep like passing each other or coming upon each other again, and they're just like, they're basically having a competition about how many orcs they've killed. And it's just like, Gimli's like, hey, haha, I got, 40 of them. And Legolas is like, "Oh, really? I just killed my 41st right over there." And Gimli's like, "Oh, I gotta get a little more." They're having like a friendly little competition. I don't know. So that's pretty entertaining. Iowan, I'll love Iowan. And then there's also the whole section with the Ents. So like the tree shepherds, that they themselves are very tree-like and kind of resemble trees, but I think they're tree shepherds, are like tree guardian guys, stuff like that. Love the Ents, love that whole section. Frodo and Sam, I love Samwise Gamgee. Sam is fantastic, and Frodo and Sam are 100% in love with each other. I will not hear any arguments otherwise. I don't care what you say. I don't care what Tolkien said. I don't care. They are 100% in love with each other. This is the only thing that I see in my head. End of story. Goodbye. Thank you. But another part of the section that I really enjoyed with those two, other than the spiders, I fucking hated the spiders. That was the worst part ever. It was disgusting. I read the book like this away from me because I just hated it so much. I loved Faramir. I loved Faramir so much that I think Faramir might have usurped Aragorn in my heart, which is saying a lot, actually. I love Faramir. He is now my favorite character, and yeah. Yeah, though, honestly, the spiders, worst fucking part ever. Both of these were 4 stars. Because, yeah, I loved them. They're brilliant, they're entertaining, but we're in quite a 5-star territory because, my god, info dumping. Otherwise, yeah, I am loving this so far. I can see 100% why these are up there, like king of the fantasy genre. Another thing that has been entertaining so far has been, while reading these, picking up on little things that I have found referenced in other books, referenced or alluded to in other fantasy novels, in other books that just are like talking a little bit about fantasy elements or nerdy stuff and things like that. Just very fascinating what little things permeate our culture because of this series, I guess. That's been very interesting as I've been reading these. But yeah, very much enjoying this series. Like I said, I am currently reading Return of the King, and having a very good time. So, yeah. But yeah, guys, that was everything that I read in April. It's been a pretty good reading month, even though I didn't really read that much, and I have so many things I should be reading, but I'm pretty fairly happy with what I did end up finishing. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please consider doing so, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.